The day is August 1st, 2016. The whole world is tuned in and preparing to watch the Olympics. However, in a quiet room, this developer is getting ready to press a button that will change the trajectory of his life forever. He doesn't know it yet, but the next years of his life will consist of massive success and issues that won't only threaten his image, but also everything he's ever worked for. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to where it all started. June 28th, 2014. A new account was created on Roblox, username Coeptus. It seemed like just another Roblox player joining the already growing platform. Nobody knew who he was, no friends, no avatar, no games. Just an empty account with unlimited potential. However, that potential wouldn't go to waste. At first he was just like everyone else, playing the popular games and exploring what this platform had to offer. But there was something special about these games that sparked something inside of him. They were fun, unique, and most importantly, possible. If others could create these experiences, why couldn't he? After years of playing throughout multiple accounts, he finally opened Roblox Studio. His first games were nothing special, they were simply basic builds made from pre-built models, cars, houses, and trees, the kind of things any beginner would make. But every expert starts as a beginner, and Coeptus was learning. But learning doesn't always mean success. His early games went nowhere. With no visits and players, he had nothing to show for his work, just empty servers. For most people, this is where the story ends. They give up, move on, tell themselves it wasn't meant to be. But Coeptus saw something different in that failure. These games didn't work because they weren't his. They were copies, low effort, and the same games everyone else was making. He needed to create something original, something that didn't exist yet, something that would give players an experience they couldn't find anywhere else on Roblox. He brainstormed and brainstormed for days upon days, trying to come up with something original, until one day it finally clicked. A game where you could simulate life, but on Roblox. You'd be able to work, earn money, build your own house, customize it however you wanted, and truly create your own story. But having an idea was only the beginning. Turning it into reality was a completely different challenge. He would start developing this new game on November 3rd, 2014. However, Roblox Studio was complicated, and every new system he tried to implement, whether it was jobs, currency, or building mechanics, came with endless bugs and setbacks. Hours would turn into days and days into weeks, with nothing but errors and crashes to show for it. However, every failure only fueled his determination. Coeptus refused to settle for less. He knew at heart that he wasn't a quitter. This game wouldn't just be another build and play, it had to feel alive. And slowly, piece by piece, the world of Bloxburg began to take shape. And finally, after 2 years of pure hard work and late nights, Coeptus finally felt like it was time to open the game. On August 1st, 2016, Coeptus pressed the button that would determine if his hard work throughout the years would pay off. However, Coeptus stated that he intentionally didn't promote the game at first, as he wanted to target a small batch of players to test the game. On release day, the game was already averaging 20 players. This was very good, and unlike most games on Roblox, which need to be promoted first to gain any traction. However, it didn't stop there, because the next day the game climbed to 50 players. This was already more players than Coeptus had anticipated, but it still didn't stop there. The next day, the game climbed up to 100 players, and so on. Each day after its release, the game would steadily gain more and more players, until finally, after a few weeks, the game had a few thousand players consistently. It was obvious, the game was very good. And also, along this growing success, content creators were pushing this game further by making videos on the game. Coeptus was finally living his dream. This is what his younger self had dreamed of. However, there was a problem with Bloxburg. The game wasn't free. Unlike most games on Roblox, which were free at the time, you had to pay 25 Robux just to play the game. This price tag itself already limited Bloxburg's player count, as not everyone had access to Robux. But Coeptus stated that the reasoning for the game being paid access was because the game was still in beta, which meant the game wasn't done and the published version was just so players could influence influence the future of the game. But there was good news. The game would eventually become free once the game was done. However, players would have never guessed how long it'd take for this promise to become true. Nonetheless, the game continued to grow throughout the years, with each update slowly unlocking more features. It was now 2018, and Bloxburg was doing amazing. This was because of all the new traffic that was arriving to the whole Roblox platform itself. The game was averaging tens of thousands of players at once, but with so many eyes focused on Bloxburg, people wanted to know more about Coeptus. You see, up to this point, Coeptus had kept his life very private. Almost nobody knew his real name or the history of his career. He seemingly popped up out of nowhere and made a hit game on Roblox. So people being nosy started making up a theory. Coeptus is Shadletsky. Shadletsky is a former Roblox admin and one of the platform's most well-known early developers. He's famous for creating classic Roblox gear and playing a major role in Roblox's early development. That being said, there are a lot of things that lined up with this theory. For example, the Roblox account Coeptus was created the same year that Shadletsky retired from Roblox, or a street name on Bloxburg itself being named Telemon, which if you didn't know is Shadletsky's alt account. Nonetheless, these were deemed as simply coincidences, as Coeptus reported he was still in college in an interview. Throughout 2019, the game was at all-time high player count records. The game was extremely popular and everyone was talking about it. However, the game was still in beta even after 3 years of its release. There was a lot of pressure being put on the developers of Bloxburg as they had to maintain such a huge game. The community was very strong and loved the game for the right reasons. The game was unique and felt special to the platform, and soon other developers would try to make copies of Bloxburg or recreate something similar. Coeptus had gone from copying trends to creating trends. Throughout the next couple of years, Bloxburg would maintain a high player count but would slowly start lacking updates, which meant there wasn't much important news going on in the community during this time range. That was until late 2022 when news came out publicly that Welcome to Bloxburg was sold to another company for $100 million. A lot of players had mixed opinions about this, as Coeptus was the original creator of the game and proceeded to call him a sellout. But the other half of people were excited as the game needed a bigger group to work on Bloxburg, which meant that now Bloxburg could receive more updates regularly opposed to recent years. Nonetheless, Coeptus got paid big time simply for never giving up and believing in himself. However, the same can't be said for Bloxburg, as recently the game has slowly been losing players. And this is most likely happening because the updates don't feel special anymore and Bloxburg has failed to adapt to the new wave of players on the platform who prioritize low effort and quick paced games. However, the development team at Bloxburg is still going hard and maybe someday Bloxburg will feel special once again. Bloxburg managed to become a $100 million empire starting from just a base plate and a kid with a dream. But most importantly, he managed to influence millions of people around the world and make Bloxburg feel like more than just a game. That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed, then please consider subscribing and liking the video. Thank you.